front, rear, or flank. Rather than struggle to defend lines of communication or supply, Grant kept none. No one had ever seen an army behave in such a manner, breaking every rule in the military playbook. A few days later, with Jackson under his control, Grant wheeled his troops toward Vicksburg. Pemberton rushed his men back from Grand Gulf to block the Union general, but it was too late. Beaten at the Battle of Champion Hill, he was forced back into the fortress, where his army was quickly besieged by the Union forces. On July 4th, Pemberton surrendered Vicksburg, a blow the South would never recover from. Interpretation. We humans are conventional by nature. Once anyone succeeds at something with a specific strategy or method, it is quickly adopted by others and becomes hardened into principle, often to everyone's detriment when it is applied indiscriminately. This habit is a particular problem in war, for war is such risky business that generals are often tempted to take the road well traveled. When so much is necessarily unsafe, what has proven safe in the past has amplified appeal. And thus for centuries, the rules have been that an army must have lines of communication and supply, and in battle must assume a formation with flanks and a front. Napoleon loosened these principles, but their hold on military thinkers remained so strong that during the American Civil War, some 40 years after Napoleon's death, officers like Pemberton could not imagine an army behaving according to any other plan. It took great courage for Grant to disobey these conventions and cut himself loose from any base, living instead off the rich lands of the Mississippi Basin. It took great courage for him to move his army without forming a front. Even his own generals, including William Tecumseh Sherman, thought he had lost his mind. This strategy was hidden from Pemberton's view because Grant kept up ordinary appearances by establishing a base at Grand Gulf and forming front and rear to march toward the rail line. By the time Pemberton had grasped the extraordinary nature of Grant's free-flowing attack, he had been taken by surprise, and the game was over. To our eyes, Grant's strategy might seem obvious, but it was completely outside Pemberton's experience. To follow convention, to give inordinate weight to what has worked in the past, is a natural tendency. We often ignore some simple yet unconventional idea that in every sense would upset our opponents. It is a matter sometimes of cutting ourselves loose from the past and roaming freely. Going without a security blanket is dangerous and uncomfortable, but the power to startle people with the unexpected is more than worth the risk. This is particularly important when we are on the defensive or in a weakened state. Our natural tendency at such times is to be conservative, which only makes it easier for our enemies to anticipate our moves and crush us with their superior strength. We play into their hands. It is when the tide is against us that we must forget the books, the precedents, the conventional wisdom, and risk everything on the untried and unexpected. 4. The Ojibwe tribe of the North American plains contained a warrior society known as the Windigokan, no-flight contraries. Only the bravest men who had demonstrated bravery by their utter disregard for danger on the battlefield were admitted to the Windigokan. In fact, because they had no fear of death, they were considered no longer among the living. They slept and ate separately and were not held to the usual codes of behavior. As creatures who were alive, but among the dead, they spoke and acted contrarily. They called a young person an old man, and when one of them told the others to stand still, he meant charge forward. They were glum in times of prosperity, happy in the depths of winter. Although there was a clownish side to their behavior, the Windigokan could inspire great fear. No one ever knew what they would do next. The Windigokan were believed to be inhabited by terrifying spirits called thunderers, which appeared in the form of giant birds. That made them somehow inhuman. On the battlefield, they were disruptive and unpredictable, and in raiding parties downright terrifying. In one such raid, witnessed by an outsider, They gathered first in front of the Ojibwe chief's lodge and yelled, "We are not going to war. We shall not kill the Sioux. We shall not scalp 4 of them and let the rest escape. We shall go in daytime." They left camp that night, wearing costumes of rags and scraps, their bodies plastered with mud and painted with splotches of weird color, their faces covered by frightening masks with giant beak-like noses. They made their way through the darkness, stumbling over themselves. It was hard to see through the masks, until they came upon a large Sioux war party. Although outnumbered, they did not flee but danced into the enemy's center. The grotesqueness of their dance made them seem to be possessed by demons. Some of the Sioux backed away. Others drew close, curious and confused. The leader of the Wendigokan shouted, "Don't shoot!" The Ojibwe warriors then pulled out guns hidden under their rags, killed 4 Sioux, and scalped them. Then they danced away, the enemy too terrified by this apparition to pursue them. After such an action, the mere appearance of the Wendigokan was enough for the enemy to give them a wide berth and not risk any kind of encounter. Interpretation. What made the Wendigokan so frightening was the fact that, like the forces of nature from which they claimed to derive their powers, they could be destructive for no apparent reason. Their mounting of a raid was not governed by need or ordered by the chief. Their appearance bore no relation to anything known, as if they had rolled on the ground or in trays of paint. They might wander in the dark until they chanced on an enemy. Their dancing was like nothing anyone had seen or imagined. They might suddenly start to kill and scalp, then stop at an arbitrary number. In a tribal society governed by the strictest of codes, these were spirits of random destruction and irrationality. The use of the unconventional can startle and give you an advantage, but it does not often create a sense of terror. What will bring you ultimate power in this strategy is to follow the Wendigokan and adapt a kind of randomness that goes beyond rational processes, as if you were possessed by a spirit of nature. Do this all the time and you'll be locked up, but do it right, dropping hints of the irrational and random at the opportune moment, and those around you will always have to wonder what you'll do next. You will inspire a respect and fear that will give you great power. An ordinary appearance spiced by a touch of divine madness is more shocking and alarming than an out-and-out crazy person. Remember, your madness, like Hamlet's, must be strategic. Real madness is all too predictable. 5. In April 1917, New York's Society of Independent Artists prepared for its first exhibition. This was to be a grand showcase of modern art, the largest in the United States to date. The exhibition was open to any artist who would join the society, whose dues were minimal, and the response had been overwhelming, with over 1,200 artists contributing over 2,000 pieces. The Society's board of directors included collectors like Walter Arensberg, and artists like Man Ray, and the 29-year-old Marcel Duchamp, a Frenchman then living in New York. It was Duchamp, as head of the hanging committee, who decided to make the exhibition radically democratic. He hung the works in alphabetical order, beginning with a letter drawn from a hat. The system led to cubist still lifes being hung next to traditional landscapes, amateur photographs, and the occasional lewd work by someone apparently insane. Some of the organizers loved this plan, others were disgusted and quit. A few days after the exhibition was to open, the Society received the strangest work so far: a urinal mounted on its back with the words R. Mutt, 1917, painted in large black letters on its rim. The work was called Fountain, and it was apparently submitted by a Mr. Mutt, along with the requisite membership fee. In viewing the piece for the first time, the painter George Bellows, a member of the Society's board, claimed it was indecent and that the Society could not exhibit it. Arensberg disagreed. He said he could discern an interesting work of art in its shape and presentation. "This is what the whole exhibit is about," he told Bellows. "An opportunity to allow the artist to send in anything he chooses, for the artist to decide what is art, not someone else." Bellows was unmoved. Hours before the exhibition opened, the board met and voted by a slim margin not to show the piece. Arensberg and Duchamp immediately resigned. In newspaper articles reporting this controversy, the object was politely referred to as a bathroom fixture.